From the outside, Amara's home looked like a picture of peace, a warm clay house with neatly swept steps, flowering hibiscus bushes, and curtains that danced gently whenever the morning breeze passed through. Neighbors often slowed down as they walked by, admiring how calm and organized everything seemed. To them, Amara was a woman whose life was settled, steady, and beautifully arranged. They saw her gentle smile, her tidy compound, her soft greetings, and they assumed everything inside was just as perfect. But perfection is often a story told from a distance. Inside those walls, Amara moved quietly, almost as if afraid to disturb the air around her. She folded clothes with careful hands, placed dishes in cabinets without a sound, and checked the time again and again, not because she was waiting for something good, but because she feared the moment her husband would walk in. Kelechi's footsteps had become something her heart recognized before her ears did. They carried a weight she could feel in her bones. When he entered the house that evening, he didn't look at her. He simply dropped his bag on the chair, loosened his tie, and walked past her as though she were part of the furniture. Not a greeting. Not a glance. Not even the slightest acknowledgement of the woman who had spent all day preparing his favorite stew. Amara felt the familiar sting, a quiet ache she had learned to hide even from herself. She stood near the table for a moment longer than she needed to, hoping, just hoping, that he would say something. Anything. But silence can be louder than anger. Why is it so hard to be seen by the person you love? She turned away, swallowing a breath she didn't realize she was holding. The stew simmered gently on the stove, the aroma filling the room with a warmth that did not reach her heart. She stirred it slowly, pretending the tears gathering in her eyes were just from the onions she had cut earlier. Kelechi's voice finally broke the silence. "Did you wash my white shirt?" he asked flatly, still not looking at her. "Yes, it's in the wardrobe," she replied softly. He didn't say thank you. He didn't nod. He simply walked away. Amara's fingers tightened around the wooden spoon. "Why do I still try?" Her own inner voice whispered the thought she never dared to say aloud, "I am disappearing in my own home." She remembered the early days of their marriage, his laughter, his gentle compliments, the way he held her hand as if the world could wait. But somewhere along the journey, the warmth had faded. The man who once admired her now barely noticed when she entered a room. And the woman who once felt cherished now felt like a shadow of herself. Outside, neighbors still believed her life was peaceful. They admired her grace, her composure, her quiet nature. But they didn't know the truth hiding behind her careful smile. They didn't know the silence that followed her through every room, or the loneliness that slept beside her each night. Amara placed the pot of stew on the table and stood still for a moment. The soft hum of the ceiling fan filled the space, but it could not quiet the heaviness in her chest. She touched her own arm gently, as if reminding herself that she still existed, that she was still here, even if no one else saw her. And somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered, a voice she had pushed away for too long. "You deserve more than this." But she didn't answer it. Not yet. She simply turned off the stove, straightened the tablecloth, and prepared herself for another evening in a home that looked perfect to everyone, except the woman living inside it. Morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting soft golden lines across the living room. Amara stood by the dining table arranging breakfast, hoping, just hoping, that today might be different. She placed Kelechi's tea carefully beside his plate and glanced toward the hallway where she could already hear the sound of his steady footsteps. Kelechi walked in with the same distant expression he wore every morning. He didn't look at her. He didn't ask about her night. He simply pulled out his chair and sat, picking up his phone even before touching the food she had woken early to prepare. Amara inhaled slowly. "Good morning," she said gently. He responded without lifting his eyes from the screen. Not even a full word. She sat across from him, hands folded on her lap. She watched him scroll, watched his eyes light up at messages from friends and colleagues, light she hadn't seen directed at her in a long time. She tried again. I was thinking, maybe this Sunday we could visit your mother? She asked about you last week. Kelechi blinked once, then glanced at her briefly, the way someone glances at a passing cloud. That's not necessary, he said flatly. I have things to do. Oh, all right. She lowered her eyes. He didn't notice. Halfway through breakfast, he frowned at his shirt sleeve. You didn't iron this well, he said sharply. Amara's heart dropped. I ironed it last night. Maybe it folded well. Forget it. He waved her off. You should pay more attention. Not a thank you. Not a kind word. Just criticism. Why does he only see me when something is wrong? Amara pressed her hands together under the table, grounding herself. She remembered when she used to share stories about her day, her small dreams, her worries. Back then, she believed marriage meant partnership. But now, every attempt to speak felt like walking through a door that never opened. Later that afternoon, she brought him a cup of tea while he worked in the sitting room. I made tea for you, she said softly. He didn't look up. Just leave it. So she placed it gently on the table. I heard there's a small community event next week, she continued, trying to keep her voice steady. Maybe we could go together? It might be nice to step out for a bit. Kelechi exhaled sharply. Amara, must you talk so much today? Can't you see I'm busy? Her lips parted slightly, the words she was about to speak dissolving before they reached her tongue. Oh. Sorry, she whispered. He didn't respond. She walked back to the kitchen slowly, each step heavy with a familiar ache. She leaned against the counter, letting the quiet press against her. Inside her mind, a thought rose, trembling but clear. I can't remember the last time he truly looked at me. Evenings were no different. When she sat beside him on the couch, he shifted slightly, never close, never welcoming. When she asked a question, he gave the shortest answer possible. When she smiled at him, he barely noticed. And yet she kept trying. She tried because she believed marriages had seasons. She tried because she hoped for change. She tried because she still remembered the man he once was. But hope can bruise a heart when it stands alone. As night settled over the house, Amara quietly folded laundry beside the bed. She heard Kelechi's voice from the other room, cheerful as he spoke to a friend over the phone, laughing in a way he hadn't laughed with her in years. A soft tear escaped her eye. Why is my voice the only one he refuses to hear? She wiped the tear quickly before it fell. And in the dim light of her room, she realized something painful yet undeniable. She was married to a man who saw everything, except her. Amara's days began before the sun lifted its head over the rooftops, and they ended long after the house fell silent. She moved from room to room with quiet purpose, setting water to boil, arranging Kelechi's shirts, preparing breakfast, packing small things, fixing what no one else even noticed. Every corner of the home carried her fingerprints, yet no one ever paused to see them. While other women in her neighborhood sometimes shared their household responsibilities, Amara carried the full weight alone. The cooking, the cleaning, the laundry, the errands, the budgeting, everything sat on her shoulders. And despite working long hours at her job, she returned each day to tasks that waited like unspoken accusations. Sometimes, she wondered how a single woman could be expected to live the life of 3 people at once. Kelechi never offered to help. Not because he couldn't, but because he never cared enough to see that she needed help. If a shirt was ironed wrong, he noticed. If a meal lacked salt, he noticed. But the woman who made it all possible? He hardly noticed her at all. His silence filled the house more loudly than words. On weekends, when she hoped for even a small moment of peace, Kelechi's mother and sister would stop by. They never raised their voices, never directly accused her, but their eyes, their pauses, their tones carried messages that pierced deeper than sharp words ever could. "Marriage requires effort," his mother would say gently, sipping her tea. "Sometimes women must try harder. Try harder." As if Amara wasn't already pouring herself into tasks until she felt empty inside. His sister would walk around the house, scanning the walls, the shelves, the tiny imperfections no one else would ever bother to look for. Then she'd sigh lightly and say, "A cold home reflects a cold heart." And somehow, the blame always slid quietly onto Amara. If Kelechi was distant, it was her fault. If the marriage felt cold, it was her fault. If the spark had died, they expected her to relight it alone. She would stand in the kitchen, her hands in soapy water, listening to their words echo in her mind. "Why am I the only one expected to fix everything?" she wondered, though she never dared to say it out loud. The world expected her to bend, but no one saw how close she was to breaking. One evening, after cleaning the living room for the second time, Amara sank onto the floor, exhausted. A single cup left on the table made her eyes sting with helplessness. Not because the cup mattered, but because it symbolized the endlessness of her responsibility. "Maybe if I do everything perfectly, maybe then someone will finally see me," she thought, her heart heavy. But perfection had never earned her peace. It had only pushed her deeper into invisibility. The night stretched around her as she closed her eyes, willing herself not to cry. She knew that tomorrow would bring the same routine, the same silence, the same expectations, the same loneliness disguised as duty. But deep inside her, a quiet truth was beginning to grow: no woman should carry an entire home alone while being blamed for the emptiness she didn't create. The evening began like any other, quiet, heavy, predictable. Amara returned home after a long day at work, her feet aching, her mind stretched thin. She placed her bag on the table, took a slow breath, and moved toward the kitchen to prepare dinner. Nothing extraordinary. Nothing new. Just another night of responsibilities waiting for her. She warmed the stew she had cooked earlier in the morning, set the plates on the table, and called softly, "Kelechi, dinner is ready." He walked in without a word, sat down, and took a bite. For a brief moment, there was silence, the kind of silence that made her hope, foolishly, that tonight might pass without tension. But the peace lasted only seconds. Kelechi frowned, pushing the plate slightly away. "This stew, it's cold." Amara blinked. "I can warm it." "That's not the point," he snapped, cutting her off. "How difficult is it to serve a simple meal properly? You can't handle the smallest thing." His words pierced the room like a blade. Sharp. Unnecessary. And painfully familiar. She felt her chest tighten, her breath unsteady. She had spent the entire day balancing work, home, and invisible expectations, and still, somehow, one cool spoonful of stew became a crime. She swallowed softly. "I didn't mean." "Of course you didn't," he said, standing abruptly. "You never mean anything. You just exist." Exist? The word echoed in her mind like thunder. Her hands trembled as she collected the plates, moving slowly to hide the sting she felt in her heart. As she reached the sink, she heard him mutter under his breath, "Useless." That single word didn't just land, it shattered something inside her. For years, she had learned to swallow pain. For years, she had convinced herself that silence kept the peace. For years, she had carried the world on her shoulders while he chipped away at her spirit piece by piece. But tonight felt different. Tonight, something in her finally reached its limit. She placed the plate gently on the counter, not trusting herself to breathe too deeply. The room felt blurry, distant, almost echoing. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She didn't fight back. She simply turned around and looked at him, really looked at him, as if seeing the man he had become for the very first time. A man who took but never gave. A man who demanded but never appreciated. A man who saw her presence as an inconvenience, not a blessing. Her throat tightened. How much more can a heart endure before it stops feeling at all, she wondered, a quiet rhetorical question that rose from the deepest part of her. She wiped her wet hands on the edge of her wrapper and walked past him. Not hurried. Not loud. Just steady, painfully steady. As she reached the hallway, her thoughts whispered inside her, soft but powerful. No one will break me again, not like this. She didn't know where that strength came from, but it felt like the first spark of something she had long forgotten, self-worth. Kelechi didn't follow her. He didn't call her back. He didn't even notice the shift in her silence. To him, it was just another evening. Another moment to brush aside. Another wound he assumed she would quietly hide. But this time, she didn't hide. Behind the closed bedroom door, Amara sat on the edge of her bed. She didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She just breathed slowly, deeply, as if learning how to breathe again. She realized something powerful in that stillness. The moment a woman stops expecting love from someone who refuses to give it, her heart begins to change. And that change had already begun. The next morning arrived with a quiet heaviness that settled over Amara like an old, familiar shawl. She moved through the house carefully, almost silently, as if any sudden sound might awaken the pain she had tucked into the corners of her heart. When Kelechi left without a word, as always, she stood alone in the doorway for a moment, steadying herself. She needed air. She needed space. She needed someone who could still see her. So she picked up her handbag and stepped outside, walking slowly toward the one place that had always felt safe, Adeora's home. Adeora had been her childhood friend, a woman with warm eyes and a spirit that could read emotions before words ever left the mouth. When Amara arrived, Adeora opened the door with a burst of joy, but the brightness on her face faded the moment she saw Amara closely. "Amara, what's wrong?" she whispered, pulling her friend into a gentle hug. Amara tried to smile, but her lips trembled. For years she had carried her pain silently, never wanting to burden anyone, never wanting to admit how empty she felt. But standing there in Adeora's living room, surrounded by warmth and familiarity, something inside her loosened, something tired, something wounded. They sat together on the sofa, and Adeora placed a comforting hand on her arm. "My friend, your eyes, they've changed. You are here, but you're not here. Tell me, what is happening?" Amara lowered her gaze. Her fingers intertwined nervously, her throat tight. "Do I even remember what happiness feels like?" she wondered, the thought echoing painfully inside her. Adeora waited, patient and kind. And finally, for the first time in years, Amara began to speak. She told her about the silence at home. The coldness. The constant criticism. The loneliness of sharing a roof with a man who refused to see her. The blame from his family. The exhaustion of carrying everything alone. Her voice trembled, cracking at moments she could no longer hide. Adeora held her hand, nodding gently, absorbing every word like someone gathering broken pieces with care. When Amara finished, she inhaled shakily, surprised by the way her chest felt lighter, not healed, but lighter, as if speaking it out loud had loosened a knot she had carried for too long. Adeora squeezed her hand. "Amara, you have been living inside a storm, pretending it is part of the sky. But suffering is not a woman's destiny. Love should not hurt like this." Amara blinked, tears softening the edges of her vision. Adeora continued, her voice steady and full of strength. You deserve peace. You deserve kindness. You deserve someone who treasures you. If Kelechi cannot see your worth, then you must see it yourself. You must choose you. The room fell quiet. Not uncomfortable, healing. A rhetorical question rose inside Amara like a whisper. How long can a woman carry everyone, yet forget to carry herself? Her heart ached, but for the first time, she felt a spark of something she had long forgotten, the desire to live for herself, not merely survive for others. Adeora placed a cup of warm tea in her hands. You are stronger than you think. You walked into this home today because your spirit is asking for change. Listen to it, my friend. Listen to the part of you that is tired of breaking. Amara closed her eyes. The warmth of the cup seeped into her palms, and for a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a future where her days were not filled with fear or sadness, a future where her worth wasn't invisible. She exhaled slowly, letting the idea settle in her heart like a fragile seed. When she opened her eyes, Adeora smiled softly, not forcing hope, but offering it. And Amara, for the first time in a long time, allowed herself to accept it. The next few days felt heavier than usual. Amara returned home with Adeora's words echoing in her mind, but the weight of reality still pressed on her shoulders. She tried to move through her routine, but her body felt slower, weaker, as if her strength was slipping quietly through her fingers. One evening, she stood in the kitchen washing the dishes. The room was silent except for the gentle clinking of plates and the faint hum of the fridge. Her hands moved mechanically, but her vision blurred at the edges. Her breath grew shallow. Her chest tightened. She paused, gripping the counter to steady herself. The world suddenly felt distant, like she was standing inside a tunnel made of fog. She blinked, trying to chase away the dizziness, but the room tilted again, harder this time. A plate slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. The sharp sound cut through the silence, but she couldn't even react. Her knees buckled. Her fingers grasped desperately at the air. And then everything went dark. When Amara opened her eyes again, she was lying on a clinic bed. The lights above her were soft, the sheets crisp, and the smell of antiseptic filled the room. She tried to sit up, but a gentle hand pressed her shoulder down. Please, rest, the doctor said in a calm, steady voice. Confusion clouded her face. What happened? The doctor exhaled slowly, pulling a chair closer to her bedside. You collapsed, Amara. Your neighbor found you and rushed you here. Your body gave out. Amara swallowed hard, her throat burning with dryness. My body gave out. The doctor continued, her tone serious but compassionate. You are exhausted. Not just physically, but emotionally. Your blood pressure is unstable, your stress levels are extremely high, and your body is showing signs of severe mental strain. Amara looked away, her eyes filling. She had known she was tired, deeply tired, but she never imagined her body would fall before her spirit did. The doctor studied her carefully. Tell me, are you under any kind of emotional pressure at home? For a moment, Amara hesitated. Then she closed her eyes, a tear slipping onto the pillow. How long can a heart keep fighting for strength it no longer has, she wondered, a silent question rising from the hollow space inside her. The doctor didn't push her for details, but she spoke with a gentle firmness that carried truth. Your body is sending a message, Amara. And if you ignore it, the consequences could be far more serious. You need rest. You need peace. And you need to take care of yourself, not just others. Amara nodded weakly, the reality settling into her bones. All her life, she had stretched herself thin, believing that a woman's strength came from how much she could endure. She thought patience would fix her marriage. She thought silence would preserve her dignity. She thought giving everything would eventually bring love back into her home. But now, her own body was telling her the truth she had avoided. She was breaking. She touched her chest lightly, feeling the slow rise and fall of her breath. The doctor placed a small file on the bedside table. "You need time away from stress. Your health depends on it." As the doctor walked out, Amara stared at the white ceiling, her mind swirling with memories, regrets, and unspoken fears. "If I fall again, who will catch me?" she whispered in her thoughts. A single tear rolled across her cheek, not from weakness, but from the sudden understanding that she had been carrying a world too heavy for her shoulders alone. She inhaled shakily, clutching the thin hospital blanket. Her journey was far from over, but something inside her shifted, quietly, painfully. Her body had forced her to stop, because her heart could no longer carry the burden by itself. The night after her clinic visit was quieter than any night Amara had ever lived through. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of the fan as it cut through the silence. Her body ached, but it was her spirit that felt the heaviest, like she was carrying years of pain inside a heart that no longer had room left. Kelechi didn't ask what had happened. He didn't ask why she collapsed. He didn't ask if she needed help. He simply walked past her, the same way he always did, as if her existence was only background noise in his world. That silence, more than anything, opened a truth she could no longer ignore. Later that night, when the house had fallen still, Amara sat at the edge of her bed with her hands folded in her lap. 4 years, she had told herself she could endure anything. That strength meant staying. That love meant sacrificing. That marriage meant holding on even when her heart was breaking. But now, she could feel a shift deep inside her. A quiet, steady realization that staying was no longer strength, it was slow destruction. Her eyes drifted to the mirror across the room. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her, tired, dim, fading. A woman who once had dreams, laughter, and hope. A woman whose light had dimmed under years of neglect. A single thought rose in her chest, soft and trembling. If I stay here, will I lose myself completely? The rhetorical question hung in the room like a quiet echo. She reached for the small drawer beside her bed and opened it gently. Inside lay a few personal things, a photograph from her youth, a small necklace her mother once gave her, and a folded piece of fabric she had kept since childhood. Her fingers brushed over them, feeling memories she had ignored for too long. Then, for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a different life, a life where mornings didn't begin with fear, where nights didn't end in tears, where her worth wasn't dismissed. And where her heart wasn't punished for simply wanting love. Her breath shook. Her hand trembled. But her spirit finally stood up. Slowly, she pulled out a small travel bag from under the bed. She opened it carefully, as if the sound alone might betray her. In the dim light of the room, she folded a few clothes, placed her documents inside, and tucked away the little necklace that meant the world to her. With every item she placed into the bag, something heavy fell out of her: guilt, fear, obligation, disappointment. It was as if packing her things was also unpacking years of unspoken suffering. She stood for a long moment, looking around the room, the walls that had witnessed her tears, the doorway where she had waited for love, the bed where loneliness had slept beside her night after night. A soft whisper echoed inside her. I deserve to live, not just survive. Before dawn, the sky still wrapped in darkness, Amara slipped her bag over her shoulder. She walked slowly through the silent house. The floorboards creaked under her feet, but she didn't stop. She didn't look back. Her heart beat with fear, but also with a new kind of strength, the strength that comes when a woman finally chooses herself. As she reached the front door, she paused. Not hesitating, remembering. Then she stepped outside, letting the cool morning air touch her face like a blessing. And just like that, Amara walked into a new beginning. The house felt different without her. Every corner, every echo, whispered a hollow absence. Kelechi wandered from room to room, touching objects she had once cared for, feeling the coldness in their stillness. The laughter that used to fill these walls was gone, replaced by a silence so heavy it pressed against his chest. He paused in the living room, staring at the chair where she would sit, a book open on her lap, sunlight catching her hair. How did I not see the light she carried? He thought, a pang of regret twisting deep inside him. The warmth he had taken for granted, the patience she had shown, now seemed irreplaceable. In the kitchen, the smell of her favorite tea lingered faintly, teasing memories he could no longer reach. He ran his fingers over the counter, remembering the gentle way she would hum as she moved, turning ordinary moments into something sacred. I never realized how much peace she brought into this house, and into my life. Kelechi's steps grew slower as he passed her bedroom. Everything looked untouched, waiting as if she might walk through the door any moment. Yet the stillness mocked him, reminding him that she had chosen herself over the shadows he had ignored. His heart ached with understanding, a quiet truth settling in. The love he had overlooked was not gone because it vanished, it was gone because he had failed to cherish it. He sank into the armchair by the window, staring out at the garden where Amara had spent hours tending flowers that now drooped under neglect. He could almost hear her voice, soft and full of life, asking questions he had always brushed aside. Was it too late to tell her I finally see her? The thought lingered like a ghost. Time stretched, empty and heavy, as Kelechi realized that the house itself seemed to mourn. The walls held a memory of laughter, of arguments that ended in her gentle forgiveness, of mornings softened by her presence. He had taken it all for granted, and now every room whispered the truth. He had refused to hear, she was the heart of the home, and without her, it was only a house. He closed his eyes, swallowing the weight of his remorse. In the quiet, he understood that love, once given freely, must never be ignored, never taken lightly. And though he could no longer bring her back, he promised himself to carry her lesson forward. Some treasures are only visible once they are gone. The house had finally missed her, and so had he. Amara opened her eyes to a morning that felt different, not brighter, not easier, but honest. For the first time in years, she felt the small stirrings of hope. Slowly, she began to rebuild the life she had left behind in silence and fear. Therapy became her anchor, a place where she could untangle the weight she had carried alone. With every session, she whispered truths she had never dared to voice, and with every truth, the knots inside her loosened. Outside, the world did not change, but Amara did. Community support offered hands she could hold, ears that could listen without judgment, and hearts that understood without question. She discovered the quiet joy of shared laughter, of ordinary moments made extraordinary simply by connection. Could life ever be this gentle? She wondered, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Each day brought a new discovery, a favorite cafe that smelled like fresh bread, a park where the sunlight painted the grass in gold, a song that lifted her spirits in ways she had forgotten were possible. She began to write again, her pen tracing her thoughts onto paper, reclaiming her voice piece by piece. Words that had been trapped in her chest found air, and with them came freedom. Amara learned that peace was not a gift to be begged for, nor a place to be found, it was something she could create. She planted flowers in a small pot by the window, tending to them as she tended to herself. She laughed when the petals fell too soon, knowing that growth is patient, and strength is gentle. She walked streets she had once feared, spoke her mind when before she had only listened, and let the world see her not as someone broken, but as someone whole. At night, she lit candles and let the light fill the corners of her apartment. The flicker danced across the walls, a quiet reminder that she had become her own home. She no longer waited for others to give her warmth, she carried it within herself. I am enough, she thought, letting the words settle deep inside. Amara's journey was not fast, nor was it perfect. But each step forward was hers, and in that ownership, she found the most profound liberation. Her heart had room again for joy, for love, for life, not the life that had demanded her surrender, but the life she chose to build. The sound of her own laughter became the melody she had longed to hear, a home she had finally made for herself. Some stories are meant to teach us what silence cannot. Amara's story is one of quiet courage, a testament to the truth that a woman's worth is never found in the pain she endures, but in the strength she summons to reclaim herself. She walked through fire that no one else could see, carried burdens that were never hers to bear, and yet, she chose life. She chose herself. How often do we confuse endurance with value? How often do we believe that suffering makes us more deserving, or that love requires sacrifice of our own spirit? Amara learned the answer the hard way: pain does not measure love, and compromise does not measure loyalty. I deserve more than this silence, she thought, as she took the first trembling step away from the life that sought to diminish her. Her journey was not just about leaving, it was about learning to recognize the walls that caged the soul and finding the courage to break them. Every small act of self-respect, every boundary drawn with care, was a declaration: I am seen. I am heard. I am enough. She became her own advocate, her own protector, her own home. Amara stands now in the sunlight of her new life, a woman remade not by the trials she faced, but by the choices she made in the aftermath. Each morning she rises, she carries with her the lessons of survival, that love should heal, not harm, that respect is non-negotiable, that peace must be earned by courage, not demanded by suffering. She reminds us all that strength is not loud, but is persistent, patient, and unwavering. Every room she inhabits, every path she walks, bears the imprint of her rebirth. The world may have tried to silence her, to shrink her presence, to make her feel less than she was, but she refused. She built a life where her voice mattered, where her heart could breathe freely, where her joy was not contingent on someone else's approval. And in that choice, she became a symbol, not just of survival, but of rebirth. Could I have ever found this courage if I had stayed? The answer echoes through her new life: courage is found when we finally choose ourselves over our fear. Amara's story is a reminder for every woman who has been told she is too much, too fragile, or too sensitive. Your worth is infinite, your voice is essential, and your spirit is unbreakable. Standing tall in the aftermath of what tried to destroy her, she embodies a truth that should never be forgotten: you do not have to endure pain to prove your value. She walks forward with her head high, not as a victim of her past, but as the author of a future, a living testament that liberation begins the moment we choose ourselves.